Okay, so what we're going to do now is take a look at a few additional options when it comes to working with bounds. So what we want to do now is get a better understanding of this idea behind parent-child relationships. So if you click on the armature and switch to edit mode, you have already seen that in edit mode we can place the bounds and establish the parent-child relationships. So if you click on this bone and go to the bone tab, here you can see that dev.shoulder.l is its parent, which is this bone over here. And of course, if we click on the tail of this bone and press the R key to rotate this bone, you can see that the child will not follow this bone, because in edit mode all you can do really is place these bones. Right click to cancel this. Now when we are dealing with armatures, if we want to see the parent-child relationship working, we have to switch to pose mode. Now when we click on this bone and press the R key to rotate the shoulder, the child will follow. Right click to cancel this. So this is the special behavior when you are working with armatures. In order to see the parent-child relationships working, we always have to be in pose mode. Now, when we click on this figure over here and drag it onto the armature and click on with automatic weights, now when we click on this bone and press the R key to rotate, here you can see that the vertices are following wherever the bone goes. Right, so here you could say that this again is actually working like parent-child relationships. The vertices are acting like children for these bones. Wherever the bones go or wherever the parents go, the children will follow. Right click to cancel this. So when you are dealing with armatures, you are pretty much at all times dealing with parent-child relationship concepts. Now we're going to go ahead and reload this file. Okay. Now you can also create parent-child relationships on the object level. So when we click on this figure, you can see that we are right now in object mode. And then when we click on this armature, we can also switch this to object mode. Now when we click on this figure and drag it onto the armature, you'll notice that over here it's saying set parent to. So if you click on object, what it's going to do is move the figure under the armature. Now when we have the figure selected and go to object mode on the object tab, you can see that the armature has been set as its parent. So this means that if we click on the armature and we want to be in object mode, zoom out, do shift middle mouse button over here, if we move the armature, the figure will follow. Okay, I'm going to Control Z that to place this back. And then if we click over here on the figure in the outliner and drag it out, here it's saying drop to clear parent. So when we do that, this is what it's clearing out. Now notice that if we click on this figure and now drag it onto the armature, here you know that this is going to make the figure the child of the armature. Now when we click on armature deform, it's going to execute this function, then this function. And then when we do with empty groups, it's going to fire off this function, then this function. And then when we choose automatic weights, it's going to do this function, and then this function. So go ahead and click on with automatic weights. Notice that over here it set the armature as its parent. Then over here on the modifiers tab, it added the armature modifier, which we have to move up. Then on the data tab, it created the vertex groups and automatically assigned the vertices to these vertex groups. So when we click on the armature and go to pose mode over here, click on this bone and press the R key, the vertices will follow. So that's what is going on over here. Now remember, Blender allows you to click on this figure even after you've performed this function and drag the figure out. So this means that now when we click on the armature and go to object mode, zoom out, shift middle mouse button, and click over here, we can separate the armature from the figure. Shift middle mouse button. So this is going to create issues, right? Because as I've shown you that when you click on this figure, you can go back to the modifiers tab and click on armature and set it up again. Notice that the figure is not the child of the armature. So now when we click on the armature and switch to pose mode, click on this bone and press the R key, you can see that the figure will still deform. But of course it's not going to work correctly because the bones are now misplaced. So if we click on this figure and go to the object tab and now click over here, click on armature, now the figure is the child of the armature. Of course if we click this over here and press the R key, everything's going to work the way it should. So this is why it's important to always have the figure as the child of the armature. Even though Blender allows us to drag it out, we shouldn't. Okay? So now you understand how this concept works. Now what I want to show you here is if we switch to object mode over here, you can see that the origin point for the armature is right over here. So when we have the armature selected and move this figure in the 3D view, we can place this figure anywhere that we want inside the 3D view, depending on what our scene looks like. So the origin point is always going to move with the armature. You can do middle mouse button to look at it like this. Now when you switch to pose mode and you click on the hip, which is right now the root bone, meaning that all the bones are really just the children of this bone, and if you move the root bone, the entire figure is going to move because all the vertices are assigned to all the deformed bones. But notice that when we move this, notice where the origin point is for the armature. It does not move with the armature because this is in pose mode, this is non-destructive. Now if we have the hip bone selected and do Alt G, it'll simply just reset the bone to the same exact position it should be when we are in edit mode. Okay, so here you can see how this concept of parent-child relationship is working. Go ahead and now reload this file. So now what we want to do is that when we click on this figure and drop it onto the armature, you'll see there's another option here. It's called bone. How do we use this? So this is going to be a good candidate for the eyes. You can do shift middle mouse button. So here you can say that because the eyes will not be deforming, we do not have to make the eye bone a deformed bone. So to do this, click on the figure and press the tab key to go into edit mode. Do A to select everything and A to deselect everything. Click on a vertex on the eye and then do Control L to select all the vertices for the eye. If you press the Z key, you can see that they're just a separate object, but they are part of the figure, meaning that these vertices are not connected to the figure in any way. Press the Z key. Now we can separate these eyes as separate objects by pressing the P key and then do separate by selection. Now here you can see that the eyes are now a separate object. We're going to double click in here and type in I.L and enter. Now when we click on the eye over here and press the tab key, you can see that this is a separate object. Now go ahead and switch to object mode again. Now of course over here we're going to have to apply the mirror modifier, and as I've said, you do not need to have the subdivision modifier. We can just delete this out. Now when we press the tab key, you can see that it has enough vertices to define the eye. So what we need to do is, now that we have applied the mirror modifier, this is one whole object. So here we can do A to select everything, A to deselect everything, click on a vertex on the right side over here, do Control L, and then do P, and now separate this eye. So now you can see that we have another eye. You can double click this, and over here just call this dot R and enter. Now we're going to click on this left eye over here. Now if you zoom out, do shift middle mouse button and go to the bottom over here, you can see that the origin point for this eye is over here. This is because the eye originally came from this object. So we're going to move this origin point to where the eye is. So having the eye selected, if you go on the tools panel, you can come over here and say origin to geometry. Now if you zoom in and press the Z key over here, A to deselect, if you just rotate, you can see that the orange dot is right now in the center of the eye. So we're going to do the same thing for this eye over here. You can right click the eye here or select it here. Just make sure that you click over here and then do origin to geometry. Now go ahead and click on the armature. Click over here and make sure that you are in pose mode. Now click on the eye. Because the eye is no longer going to be a deformed bone, we should click over here and uncheck this for both of them. So Blender should not create vertex groups for these eye bones, because we're simply going to attach the eyes or make the eyes the child of these bones. So go ahead and click on this bone over here, press the shift key down and then click on this bone. Now notice that both bones are connected, but it doesn't actually matter because this is the last bone we clicked on, which is the active bone, and it shows right here that you've selected this bone. But if this bothers you, you can simply click on this bone over here. Notice that the eye is still selected. Now, when we do Control P, here we can click on bone. Now when we click on this eye, you can see that it's moved under the armature, and when we click on the object tab, you can see that how this concept is working over here. It's made the armature its parent, and over here it's saying that it's going to be the parent type of bone, and then it's selecting the dev.eye.l as its parent. So now when you click on this eye and press the R key 2 times, you can see that we can start to move this object, meaning that wherever the parent goes, the child will follow. Go ahead and do this for this eye over here. Click on this eye, press the shift key down, click over here, do Control P, and now do bone. And press the R key 2 times just to make sure that everything's moving over here. So notice that over here, both eyes are now the child of the armature. Now click on this figure. Now when we click on the figure and drag it onto the armature and then do with automatic weights, go to the modifiers tab and bring this up. Go to the data tab and open this up and type in eye. You'll see that there are no vertex groups. This is because in this case, because the eyes are not going to be deforming in any way, they're simply just separate objects that will follow the eye bone. So that's how that works. Now here, as an example, I'm not going to build this right now, but here, if you created a hat might not need to be deformed in any way. So even though this bone is marked as a deformed bone, you can actually take a hat or a baseball cap and make it a child of this bone. So you can make objects children of bones directly, or you can have the bones deform the vertices with vertex groups. Okay, so over here, what we're going to do is now simply go ahead and just reload this file. Okay, so I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you.